In 2016, I got extremely ill. I had no more energy in my body. All I wanted to do was sleep all day. I decided to go and see my regular GP, who I've been seeing for probably the last 4 years. Everything on his side seemed okay, other than a high blood pressure. But as a doctor, he should have known that he should have checked my kidneys. The GP actually just diagnosed me wrong for all the years. I was still spinning on a spinning bike a month before I got diagnosed with kidney failure. My name is Lisa Samuels. I'm 40 years of age. I'm currently suffering of end-stage renal failure.
Izindlela zethu esizikhethayo zokuziphatha zingaseka impilo yethu noma zisigulise kakhulu. Kulolu chungechunge sibona izigulo ezikhathazwa isimo sempilo, sibheke nokuthi zingenza kanjani ukuguqula isimo sempilo yazo. Namhlanje sihlangana noLisa, ophethwe isigaba sokugcina sokuhluleka kwezinso. Hlala nathi njengoba ungoti bethu besithulela ingqikithi ngalesi sifo.
That's when my mother suggested me go and have another test at the pharmacy. My blood pressure. When I got to the pharmacy, the pharmacist looked at me and he looked a bit shocked because my blood pressure was 209 over 109 or something to that effect.
We all have a normal blood pressure, and the blood pressure is essentially the pressure that is generated when your heart pumps blood through the body. So hypertension is a disease that affects many organs of the body, and it can give rise to heart enlargement, it can give rise to strokes, it can also result in severe kidney disease. And we not often, and if the blood pressure is really severely out of control, it can affect the kidneys quite severely. So many patients that we see who have kidney disease are there because the blood pressure has been totally uncontrolled.
I immediately called another doctor and he looked at me and he said, "My girl, I could do many tests for you, but my best suggestion would be is for me to book you into a hospital." I met the nephrologist the next morning, and he said to me that unfortunately after all the tests, he can see that I am at end-stage renal failure.
Kidney disease is quite silent, and because of that, the initial symptoms may be misdiagnosed, and the patient may present with just tiredness or just fatigue, very vague symptoms, and it may well be that the initial diagnosis is missed, and only subsequently, when the disease gets worse or the patient develops other symptoms, that the correct diagnosis is made.
I was a competitive ballroom dancer, so my focus was being a dancer, and obviously after having kids I stopped, but I still enjoyed being active, and that is why I did Zumba dancing thrice a week, and obviously then started enjoying a spinning bike, at the gym. And so I think I had a pretty healthy lifestyle before being diagnosed.
Now, what does the kidney do? The kidney has several functions. One of the most important functions in the body is to get rid of poisons and that accumulate in the body, and that occurs from normal food and the drink that we take in, and the body then gets rid of the poisons that accumulate in the body. The second thing that it does is get rid of fluid. So if you're taking too much fluid, get rid of the fluid. If you're not taking enough, then it holds back the fluid so that your body always adequately hydrated. And once the kidney starts failing, because it is responsible for maintaining the internal environment of the kidney, virtually all organs in the body are affected in one way or another.
My doctor, the new nephrologist, he told me if I'd seen him before it got to that stage, you could have still saved my kidneys. You could have put me on medication to save me. But unfortunately, I was misdiagnosed, and yeah, and that's how I got to the point of getting to end-stage renal failure. It also made me realize that sometimes we need to also get a second opinion about things, because we know our bodies. We know if there's something wrong. There's always a warning sign, and we just need to actually listen to our bodies.
So it's not particularly difficult to diagnose, but one needs to have a relatively high index of suspicion in certain groups of patients. So your patients who are hypertensive, diabetic, the elderly, one should have a relatively high index of suspicion that there may be underlying chronic kidney disease in these patients. So one of the things that we do when we have kidney disease is to make sure that we control the blood pressure very carefully, because if it goes out of control, it just accelerates the kidney damage and makes the kidney function go off much faster. But once you have kidney disease, it's really very important to maintain a healthy lifestyle in order to minimize the impact that it would have on the diseased kidney.
So after being diagnosed, the doctor obviously explained that I will have to immediately have a surgery or have surgery done to have a catheter inserted in my chest for the dialysis treatment. He booked me into hospital, I think a couple of days later. I had the catheter inserted and a fistula put in my arm for dialysis later on.
Dialysis is a way of replacing some of the functions of the kidney. There are essentially two forms of dialysis. The one is hemodialysis and the other one is peritoneal dialysis. Hemodialysis involves an artificial kidney which is attached to a machine. The blood is taken from the patient's circulation. It runs through the filter, the artificial kidney filter, and then returned to the patient. What we do with peritoneal dialysis is we insert a tube into the tummy, into what we call the peritoneal cavity. We then allow about 2 liters of special fluid, and what is special about the fluid is essentially it's a combination of salt water and sugar water which goes into the tummy. It's left there for a period of about 4 to 6 hours, and it's then drained out again. And this is then done about 4 times a day, every day.
But because I was out and about, I'm seeing different clients, it wasn't going to work for me. Fortunately for me, the company accommodated me to allow me to do my dialysis early in the morning, and obviously work from home should I not be up to being on the road and that type of thing. With the hemodialysis, I can jump in my swimming pool. I can do normal things. I can have a shower and not worry about the cord that's attached to my abdomen. So those are all things that I did for my lifestyle. It's not necessarily going to work for somebody else. So right now, hemodialysis, it's okay. It's tiring on the body, but I'm managing okay. I currently stay with my partner and my 2 daughters. I am full-time employed, but due to COVID, I am currently working from home. Before my diagnosis, I was single, and about 5 months later, I started my relationship, and it's now 5 years in. It took a lot for Michael, maybe, before meeting me, that, or let's just say when he met me, to see me as a sick person. And not up until today, not once he made me feel like I'm a sick person. And that is so important, because that also makes me fight every single day to be here the next day. Not just for the kids, but for my family, for my sisters, my mother. Because it's hard. I'm actually getting a bit teary, because that's the fight we do every day. So once, obviously, my diagnosis is given to me, I go and see my normal or my nephrologist, and his suggestion to me is that because of my health and also because of my age, he would suggest I get a suitable transplant candidate to do a transplant. I look at, obviously, my 2 sisters are very willing and able to come forward and offer to get tested. We have the test done, and both sisters at the time are both my blood type and suitable matches for a kidney transplant. The doctor suggests that we go with my older sister because she has big grown kids already and she's pretty healthy and she's not overweight. The younger one at the time was younger, obviously, and had no kids at the time. So they would think that this elder sister would be a more suitable match, seeing that her kids and family are already, grown up and able to fend for themselves.
One of the biggest concerns that we have with kidney transplant is rejection, because the body often does not recognize the donor kidney as a self. The body tends to reject. That's a normal sort of phenomenon. But despite the fact that we give the medication, there are patients who do reject. That does happen.
So in 2017, I had a failed kidney transplant. Okay, it is now 4 years later, and kidney transplant is the only other option other than dialysis, which is working for me at the moment. So it's something that I really have to think hard and long about, whether I'm going to go with another sibling. But that's something that I need to work on on myself to go that route again.
Emuva kwekhefu, uLisa uhlangana nochwepheshe wakhe kwezokunakekelwa kwempilo. Sifunda kabanzi ukuthi i-dialysis yini nokuthi ingaba imthelela kanjani empilweni yakhe. Siyanamukela futhi ku-Killers in Our Midst. Lapho sifunda khona ngokuthi indlela yethu yokuziphatha ingayithinta kanjani impilo yethu. uLisa Samuels usesigabeni sokugcina sokuhleleka kwezinso, futhi uthola ukwelashwa okuvamile kwe-dialysis. Useke waba ne-transplant yezinso engaphumelelanga. Manje ucabanga ngokunye ukuhlinzwa. Ingabe konke lokhu kuyayithintela kanjani impilo yakhe? Ake sizwe ke.
Morning, Sister Connie.
Hi, morning, Lisa. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
You're good.
Good.
Glad to see you. Come, have a seat. Lisa, your blood pressure is a little bit high, but I guess maybe there is a bit of fluid over. So we're going to put in your needles, Lisa. This is the arterial side. And we connect the arterial side to the arterial needle, which will be the bottom needle, and the blood will go through this whole system, and it will come to the dialyzer where it capture all the toxins. Your phosphate, your ureas, your potassium, that will stay behind in the dialyzer, because the dialyzer is made out of lots and thousands of fibers. So your dialyzer, it actually functions as your kidney.
Okay.
So what we also need to understand, Lisa, this dialyzer takes the part of the kidney, and what your kidneys does in 24 hours. This dialyzer and the machine does it in 4 hours. Blue line is the venous line, and the venous line is giving your clean blood back into your system. If your fluid is too much in your body, so what will happen is your fluid will go sit in your body tissue. So what will happen, the more you drink and the more you become overload, that fluid is going and it goes sits around the lungs, and that is where people run into trouble with pneumonia, because there is water on the lung. But it also not just affects the lungs, it affects the heart also. The reason why you get shortness of breath, if there is lots of water in your thoracic cavity, your lungs cannot expand, and that is why it is that shallow breathing, because the lung can't do what it's supposed to do. With the heart, it sits under the heart, and it can lead to pulmonary edema where there is swelling of the heart. Okay?
Sure.
Lisa, I'm just going to go into some nutritional education with you, if that is okay. Firstly, you know you are a hypertension patient, and the salt in your diet is very, very important, that you not even minimize salt, but you cut out all salt out of your diet. Because also the salt, it makes your blood pressure rise. The more salt you take, or if you take salt in your food, it makes you thirsty. Okay. And then you want to drink more fluid, which can also push you over into fluid overload. So you can substitute the salt with just a little spice to give the food a bit of a taste. Yes. Then we cut the salt completely, because salt is bad for the blood pressure.
Okay.
All right? Okay. The potassium, we look at the most beautiful fruit that we all love. So that will be bananas, it will be oranges, it will be avos, watermelon, and that is a type of fruit that we really would like you to stay away from, as hard as it is. Lisa, with the phosphate is in most of the foods. Phosphate is in bread, it's in milk, it's in dairy products. And because it is a very small molecule, the dialysis machine don't take out all the phosphate.
Okay.
So what we give for the phosphate is the phosphate binders. That is very important. So your phosphate binder, you will eat just before you have your meal, and you have to eat it 3 times a day.
Okay.
All right? So that is the importance of the phosphate.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Emuva kwekhefu sizokhe sizwe ngolisa ukuthi kuhamba kanjani emva kokulashwa kwamasonto amabili. Sizothola ingqikithi ngempilo yakhe, futhi sikhulume namalungu omndeni wakhe ukuzwa ukuthi babhekene kanjani nalokho. Uchwepheshe wethu naye uzosithulela ingqikithi ekhona ku-Medical Minute. Siyanamukela futhi kuchungechunge lwethu ngendlela yokuziphatha, i-Killers in Our Midst. Kulesi siqephu sizwe ukuthi uLisa Samuel uphilisana nesigaba sokugcina sokuhluleka kwezinso, nokuthi futhi uthola i-dialysis ngokuvamile. Manje emuva kwamasonto ambalwa sifuna ukuzwa ukuthi kuhamba kanjani, nokuthi umndeni wakhe ubhekene kanjani nalokho. Futhi hlala ulalele izeluleko zabochwepheshe bethu kwi-Medical Minute.
When I was diagnosed, the doctor did explain the effects of what overload is in the body. He gave me a limit of 750 mils a day. So I try and look at what my intake is with a morning coffee or afternoon glass of water. I do monitor it, as well as I still do a urine output. So that also obviously gets rid of excess water or fluid in my body. So at the moment, what we do is we try and substitute salt for spices, so that there's still some flavor in the food, because otherwise it will just be bland if we didn't add salt. So yeah, I try to minimize, keeping away from potato crisps, salty biscuits. So yeah, I mean obviously red meats also contain a lot of salt, so that is also something that we have to monitor. Otherwise, everything in moderation.
In the beginning, it was harder to deal with because we didn't really know anything. So now that we are more educated, it's easier for us to deal with it. Seeing her also happy 4 years later, she's still the same person. She hasn't changed one bit. Yes, there are times where she is a bit fatigued. You know, it just goes with the illness. And that is how we will always be there to support her.
Like, I am still a match. I am willing to donate to her, but I feel like because of what happened in the past, she's a little bit scared of not only doing it for herself but for me, and the emotions that I might feel like Lynn did about maybe it failing. But I don't have that in my heart because we have faith, and maybe it wasn't meant to be at that time, but maybe now is the time. But it's completely up to her. Like, she knows, like, there's a spare here for her to use if she's ready, because I'm ready for her when she is.
Now, overall, the number of transplants have really declined, and that has unfortunately impacted very heavily on patients who are on dialysis. So what normally happens is when the patient develops end-stage kidney disease, we place them on dialysis, and we hope that dialysis is really a temporary and holding treatment until we can get a transplant. Now, because the number of transplants has actually diminished because the donors have declined in numbers, patients are waiting longer and longer on dialysis. And because they're waiting longer, the prognosis of those patients, the outcomes are generally poor. So many patients die on dialysis before we can actually get them transplanted. So I think I would like to appeal to everybody to consider becoming organ donors. That would help to increase the pool of donors in the country, and help patients who are really desperate to be transplanted.
So it's been nearly 5 years that I've been on dialysis, and the way forward right now for me is to seriously consider another transplant. I am in talks with my professor at the moment, who is adding me onto the kidney transplant list, and that would be for any cadaver donors going forward.
Noma ngabe uLisa kumele ahlale elindile itransplant yezinso, kodwa umoya wakhe muhle kakhulu futhi uyazenza izinguquko ezibalekile ngokusekwa ngumndeni wakhe nangenguquko yendlela yokuziphatha kanye nokungenela kwezokulashwa. Indlela yakhe kulesi sifo ingasimama kakhulu. Ngesonto elilandelayo kwiKillers in Our Midst sizohlangana nesiguli esisha esinesifo ngenxa yendlela yokuziphatha. Ningaphutheli.